Hello and welcome to RT Ministries. My name is Dwayne and this is the Bible study portion of RT Ministries. Today we're starting in John chapter 18. John chapter 18. We got through 18 chapters already. So we're getting towards the end. And we'll get through this whole Bible together. There's many things we can learn. There's always something you can learn no matter how much you know, how much you read. God has teachers and preachers for a reason. And He gifted me to teach and preach, so let's learn together. John chapter 18, verse 1. When Jesus had spoken these words, He went forth with His disciples over the ravine of the Kidron, where there was a garden in which He entered with His disciples. Now this garden of Gethsemane, the garden that He usually went into, and it's where this is usually where Jesus slept. Because He didn't have a roof over His head. He didn't have anything. So this is where Jesus stayed most of the time. 2, now Judas also, who was betraying Him, knew the place, for Jesus had often met there with His disciples. Now here brings back Judas, the one who's going to betray Him. Judas was a thief from the beginning. He was obviously a sinner, and his father was the devil. But Judas knew where Jesus hung out most of the time, and this was in this garden with His disciples. You know, Judas did everything he was prophesied to do, but he did it on his own will. You know, God's will, it's hard to understand, but God's purpose works along with people's will. You can't override God. We do according to God's will, but we do it on our own choices. So he knew the place, because obviously Judas was with him for 3 years, so he knew the place. And the Bible says Judas went where he belongs, and that's hell. Judas is in hell now. He's been there 2,000 years. And I may remind you that Jesus said it would be better off if Judas was never born. That's a terrible indictment about Jesus Christ, because He's the one who judges people. 3, Judas then, having received the Roman cohort and officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. All right. So Judas already made the deal, and he met all the Romans and all the cohorts from the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They came with torches and weapons, and most scholars think there's anywhere from 100 to 400 people here. This was a very large amount of people. And they came, obviously, if they had to come with torches, they came at night, and they came with weapons. I'm not sure, because they didn't know what Jesus would do. They knew He was powerful. They knew He was a miracle worker, so... Again, this was not like 10 people. This was a very large amount of people at night. Verse 4, so Jesus, knowing all these things that were coming upon Him, went forth and said to them, whom do you seek? Okay, Jesus knew this was going to happen, right? Again, Jesus was 100% human, but He was also 100% God. And God revealed things to Him as the human Jesus. So Jesus walked up and said, who do you seek? 5, they answered and said to Him, Jesus the Nazarene. He said to them, I am He. Now He is added for clarification, but the term I am designates Jehovah, Jesus Christ, God. Jesus, here's another indicator that Jesus is God, because Jesus said to them, I am. And Judas also, who was betraying with Him, was standing with them. So Judas came right beside the one Jesus was talking to. Judas was right there. Let me speak a word about betrayals. Now, betrayals has got to be the worst, just about the worst thing a person can do to another person. Because when trust is given to somebody, and we've all been betrayed, and I'm afraid we've all betrayed other people, all of us, myself included, to one level or another. We've all betrayed people. But it's terrible when somebody gives you their trust and you betray them. So 6, so when He said to them, I am, they drew back and fell on the ground. Now this is the whole body, everybody. The 100 to 400 people, boom. As soon as Jesus said, I am, they all fell on the floor. They all drew back and fell on the ground. Now why? Because Jesus is God. He said, I am. He's the great I am. This is, when Jesus said every knee will bow, is that going to be a problem for the Lord? No. Every knee will bow, whether they want to or not. So the whole court kind of drew back and boom, on the ground. Because he is the great I am. Jesus Christ is God. And if you're a Christian, you need to believe that. A lot of people don't believe Jesus is God. They believe he's a teacher. They believe he's a good something, a good prophet, whatever. May I say, if you just believe that about Christ, you're not saved. You need to believe the Bible teaches clearly that he's God. That's why they drew back and fell on the ground. 7, therefore, he again asked them, whom do you seek? And they said, Jesus the Nazarene. So he asked them the same question twice, and they answered the same thing twice. 8, Jesus answered, I told you, I am he. Now he is added for clarification. This is not the original. Jesus answered, I told you, I am. Now he's telling you, I am God. So if you seek me, let these go their way. So Jesus said, look, if you're coming to get me, let my disciples go. 9, to fulfill the words which he spoke, of whom you have given me, I have lost no one. And Jesus has lost no one since his disciples, or from the 2,000 years and the thousands of years before that, he has lost none. And you can rest assured that you can put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, and he will never lose you. He will always keep you. We have such feeble faith sometimes that Jesus can't handle what we're into or can't handle what's going on in our lives. Let's glorify God by trusting him and having confidence. Confidence comes from trust. A lot of people don't have confidence because they have no trust. They have no trust because they're really not saved. They really don't trust him for their soul. They really don't trust him for anything. They just want maybe some of the perks that go along with it. But confidence comes from trust. 10, Simon Peter then, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off the right ear. And the slave's name was Malchus. Now Peter got excited, drew his sword and swung it, cut off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest. The slave's name was Malchus, and he cut off the high priest's ear, Now, when you draw a sword and you aim it and you thrust it, you're not aiming for somebody's ear. I think Peter was aiming for this man's head. And he got his ear. The guy turned his head and got his ear. Chopped his ear right off. Cutting off his right ear. Because he struck the high priest's slave and cut off the right ear, and the slave's name was Malchus. So, Jesus said to Peter, put the sword into the sheath. Okay, he said, put your weapon down. Now Peter loved the Lord. This is why he did it. The cup which the Father has given me, shall I not drink it? Jesus said, look, this is God's will. Shall I not do it? And this is part of a lot of things God does we just don't understand. A lot of things coming in your future out there, Christian, that you won't understand. Your death might be coming. Whatever's coming. If you believe God's sovereign, then believe whatever comes in your life. That's just the way we live, by faith, not by sight, right? The just shall live by faith. 12, so the Roman cohort and the commander and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. It doesn't say it in this gospel, but another gospel it said Jesus healed the ear, Malchus's ear. He touched it and healed it. Jesus put his ear back on. The creator of the universe touched Malchus's ear and created a new one. Again, the other gospels say that, but this one doesn't. John just chose to say he got his ear, and that was it. So the officers bound Jesus, arrested Jesus, and bound him. Now, Jesus' ministry is almost over. Now, you think when somebody got arrested, that either God don't have control or he has lost control. That's not true. This is all part of God's will that all this happened. 13, and led him to Annas first, for he was father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Now, he led him before the high priest. This was at night now. This was against the law, the Jewish law, to try anybody at night. So this was unjust what they were doing. Now, Caiaphas was the one who advised the Jews that it was expedient for one man to die on behalf of the people. Now, and again, Caiaphas said that on his own accord, but he also fulfilled prophecy. This is how God works. People, nobody's out of God's will. You know, man goes his own way and God guides his footsteps, the Bible says. Or man makes plans and God laughs. Because God's in control of not only circumstances, not only creation, but also people. Full 100% control. 15. Simon Peter was following Jesus, and so was another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest and entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. Now Peter was following at a distance. Now everybody else scattered. Peter scattered that night when Jesus got arrested. Everybody else scattered, but Peter was following him at a distance, watching Jesus be arrested and let in. Everybody said, yeah, Peter was a wimp, but listen. If you're standing in the garden with Jesus Christ, 12 disciples, and 100 to 300, 400 people come to arrest him, and they arrest him and take him, what would you do? Would you want to be arrested? You know, we always give the disciples a hard time, but most of us would have ran too. They scattered because they didn't want to be arrested. They thought the whole game was over. They didn't quite fully understand everything yet. 16, but Peter standing at the door outside. Okay, Peter was out at the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the keeper and brought Peter in. Now, Peter was on the outside, and the other disciple, most people think it was Mark, brought him in. 17. Then the slave girl who kept the door said to Peter, now, this is a slave girl, you are not also one of this man's disciples, are you? He said, I am not. Here's one of Peter's first denial that he was. Now, this just happened by a little slave girl. The way Satan works is very crafty and it's very unexpected. You wouldn't think Peter would fall by a slave girl, but this is denial number 1. Now the slaves and the other officers were standing there, having made a coal fire, for it was cold and they were warming themselves. And Peter was also with them, standing and warming himself. Now he answered this. Jesus is arrested. This girl says, aren't you one of them? He says, no, I'm not one of them. I don't know him. I'm not one of them. So they're all standing around a fire warming themselves. The high priest then questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Now, Jesus was getting grilled about his teaching and his disciples. I think I'm going to stop here. Look, if you're with Jesus for 3 years and all of a sudden he's arrested, you're scared because there's hundreds of soldiers, Sanhedrin, Pharisees, they're all, or not Sanhedrin, but the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and they're all there in front of you, they all scatter. Wouldn't you be scared too? Peter was staying close, but now Jesus is getting grilled about his disciples and his teaching. Now, Jesus didn't give information out. A lot of times, Jesus just kept silent. Now, he taught out in the open. Jesus never taught in secret. So he taught out in the open. And he's being grilled. And again, I want people to understand this. The disciples didn't understand that this was part of God's plan. According to their view, everything was falling apart. And look, if your life is falling apart, or everything is falling apart, you're following the Lord and it's falling apart, it really isn't falling apart. God is in control and he's doing it all. God has everything in 100% control. Trust him. Lean not on your own understanding, the Bible says, but in all your ways acknowledge him. So, if you don't understand, don't lean on your own mind. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him. If you don't understand, then just acknowledge him. Say, God, I know you're in control and I trust you. That's the way to glorify God. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Bye.